Welcome back to the Hoops Lounge with the show that LeBron no longer follows on Instagram. My name is Marc Griffin, aka Montreal Mark. I'm joined by my partner in crimes, Phil Boileau, Sporting Phil. I don't know if that's grammatically correct. Crimes, Justin Rowan, Cavs Canada, and we're going to talk a bevy of basketball. I'm going to start with a little bit of curveball, guys. Trivia question: who is leading the NBA in double doubles this month, March 2016?
That's tough.
I'm saying Andre Drummond.
Hassan Whiteside.
It's John Wall. Justin, what the heck is going on in Washington, John Wall included?
They've had some bad luck this season with injuries. One of their bigger pickups in the offseason, Allen Anderson's been hurt. Jared Dudley's had missed time. Bradley Beal's always hurt. Nene has missed time. Beyond that, it's just bad coaching. John Wall is, in my opinion, a high-end talent. But at the same time, he's never been the captain of a league average offense. It's a predictable offense. The one facilitator for everybody offense has kind of been faded out of the NBA. So I think it's just injuries, poor supporting cast, and a little bit too predictable of an offense.
Phil, we got to see them play the Raptors during the preseason. What stood out for you for the Washington guys?
I mean, the first thing I got to say is it's kind of weird if you're saying a big pickup Allen Anderson. I think that's something you got to worry about. But, I mean, I looked at this team, and it didn't look like, and I know I'm going to repeat myself, didn't look like they like each other. It just looks like there's some good talent there. I really like Beal. I really like Wall. Gortat is just a monster, super underrated. I think Otto Porter has taken another step this year. And they have some other, I really like Kelly Oubre, actually. But, yeah, I just think it's one of those things. They have talent, and it hasn't come together. Injuries have obviously decimated them. But at the same point, I just don't think there's that team chemistry. And I think coaching is a large part of that. But I just think it's the wrong mix of players. And I don't know how you fix it because I don't know what's really causing it. But to me, John Wall seems on his own little island in that team. He gets his numbers and his assists, but it doesn't feel like when you watch Chris Paul lead his Clippers, when you watch Damian Lillard lead the Trailblazers, you feel like they actually care how the other players do over just the win. And when I watch John Wall, I have doubts that that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Justin, they're sitting in 10th in the East. I don't think they're going to get in. Do you think they're going to blow it up during the summer?
I definitely think they have to evaluate some things. They wanted to be a major player for Kevin Durant. I don't think that's likely. Bradley Beal's talked about being on a minute restriction for the rest of his career, and he wants a max contract. So there's a lot of things going on there. Nene might retire. I think next year's Wizards are going to look very different. It's just funny to see. It's probably funny for Wizards fans who had obviously they have a rivalry with the Cavaliers. They always criticize 20-year-old Kyrie Irving for not making the playoffs with Dion Waiters as his number 2 sidekick. They said one player was enough to get them into the playoffs, and now John Wall can't do it. So I think it's a good example that you need a complete team to make it into the playoffs in this NBA.
Phil, I mean, a lot of people are saying Whitman's not the right person to coach this team. Who would you take if you could?
There's a lot of names I like. I actually think this is kind of a nice Thibodeau system. I think a lot of these guys need to be kind of just, slapped across the face and said to wake up a bit. And I'm not sure if I don't agree that John Wall is one of those players. I think it's kind of interesting what Justin is saying, alluding to Kyrie Irving. I mean, obviously that was downplaying Kyrie Irving's talent, but is he that leader? And I think kind of like how Kyle Lowry had that experience in Toronto with Masai, how he was kind of showing if you really want to win, you need to up your game here, and it's not always just on the court. And I think he's one of those players. I think I think he has all the talent in the world to be, one of the top point guards for sure. But in terms of the mental makeup, he's an intelligent guy. I just think he needs kind of a shakeup. I put him weirdly in the Kentucky context, like him and DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, if they just had their heads on straight, could be the best their position or really close to. So whatever coach can make that happen, I just think Thibodeau's a tough guy. So that's my call.
The Wizards probably not making the playoffs. John Wall and the team pretty much an enigma in the NBA this year. Moving ahead, Dirk Nowitzki is doing things at the age of 37 that no 37-year-old man should be doing. Those are pretty much Derek Harper's words, talking about this 40-point game, the stretch of 8 or 9 consecutive 20-point games. Phil, what's standing out to you about the mighty German?
I mean, there's a couple things. I think the Dallas Mavericks are incredibly well coached by Carlisle. We've touched on this on many levels, but he's also got a game that, not necessarily predicated on athleticism, is built for the long haul. And he's a student of the game. He has one of the most beautiful shots in the game. I'm not overly surprised that this is the case. Like, watching his game from, when he came in the league and coming forward, like I looked at his game compared to guys like, Garnett and Duncan and the other guys who were coming up with the big power forwards in the league. And in my mind, anytime you have that jump shot and you have that high basketball IQ, I think it's a little bit more points than maybe they thought, but, he's doing it in an efficient way, and he, again, doesn't have that ego. But I don't know how it's going to play. He says he's going to be back on his contract, but I kind of feel bad for the guy, like still being this good on a team that is a little bit overachieving for the team that they are. It's tough.
Justin, they're battling for the 8th spot. Do you think they get it?
I think they get it. It's going to be really close. Utah is obviously very young and hungry. No Chandler Parsons hurts them. The thing that stands out to me is just the timing of when Dirk's having this big boon in his play. He's playing out of his mind, fighting for their playoff lives at his age. It just really is impressive. I give them the edge because of coaching. I really do believe in Rick Carlisle. Houston's kind of they floundered a little bit. They did get the win over the Raptors, but if I had to guess, I think Dallas does make the playoffs.
Phil, here's an interesting quote. Dirk was asked last week if he was a sneakerhead, and his response was, "Material things don't mean that much to me." How is he different than the average guy in the league?
Because I think he sees it as a job and not a right that he was just born into. I think he realizes he's earned this, coming from Europe, having to prove himself on a lot of levels and a lot of haters. It's kind of funny because that same quote reminds me when we spoke to Karl Anthony Towns a little while ago, and I was asking him about, how he feels about NBA 2K, and a lot of players have affinities for that, and he's just like, no, I'm into the real game. You just get guys who are the consummate professionals, and I think that just speaks to that. Like, I don't think guys work on their game on this level, especially after a certain point of success, and continue to want to dominate and do, extracurricular activities, as in, worlds and Olympics, the way he does. He's just a gym rat who is incredibly good, and I don't think he's ever let his ego take control of his life.
Justin, is there any shot in the dark at all that can get past a team like Golden State, San Antonio in the first round?
No.
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 Simple answer.
No, well, when you really look at it, there's 5 teams in the West that would make the playoffs if they were in the East in terms of record. The bottom half of the West is very weak. The West is still the stronger conference because they're the ones with 3, maybe 4 if Blake Griffin's healthy. They might have 4 contenders there, but the bottom half is ugly. We're talking about a Mavericks team that's going to have to scrape to make the playoffs. If they get that 8th seed, there's no way that they get more than a game against Golden State, and even that might be generous.
Okay, the Mavericks, team to watch, a team aging very quickly. LeBron James, a great article this week in Bleacher Report by Howard Beck talked about the brotherhood. And the thought is that LeBron is going to join eventually CP3, Melo, and DWade as a supergroup down the road. Justin, your thoughts?
God, that sounds like a really, really old band getting together when none of them can move around and play. It's frustrating, especially when you look at Melo and LeBron both talking about joining together, whereas DWade said, I want to focus on my current teammates, I'm focused on the playoffs. I think that would be the mentality that you would expect from LeBron. I think that's the mentality you'd expect from a leader. granted, the quote did come prior to the All-Star break, but he did nothing to refute it, and he kind of doubled down on that, saying that he does want to play with Carmelo. It's funny. I'm not sure where that reunion would happen, but Carmelo did say that it needed to happen somewhere warm, which it's funny that Melo, when presented with the opportunity to play with LeBron and contend for a title, is like, well, it better be somewhere warm. That's kind of the mentality that's come to define Carmelo throughout his career.
Phil, where does that reunion happen?
I mean, I think it's sad to say, but I can see them taking their talents back to South Beach. I mean, it's warm. I think the personality of the team and the city kind of makes sense. I personally don't care that much just because I feel they're all about 30-31 by now. I still think LeBron wants to take his licks there with Cleveland for a bit longer. I'm feeling bad for Chris Bosh. He's not being mentioned in that. Carmelo Anthony, I mean, I think he's been one of the more overrated players for a while. CP3, I don't think he's done in Clipperland until they really blow it up. I think him and LeBron still want to prove a bit. There's still a couple years left. So if we're talking about a team that comes together when they're 33-34, cool, I guess, but not a lot of shooting on that team. A lot of guys who need
defense.
Yeah, not a lot of defense. A lot of guys who need the ball. Like, I don't even think that team would be that good. Like, I remember a comparison saying, would that team right now even beat Golden State? And I'm like, I don't know. I think Golden State would kind of run around them. But, you know, at the same point, there's a lot of great young players coming in the league that I can see, imagine the Timberwolves get another great pick. And in 2 years, you have a Wiggins and a Towns and whoever that was, maybe Ben Simmons, who have really come into it. Like, are they going to get walked over by a 34-year-old version of that super team? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think the competition's going to be really there, and I don't think they're going to be that good. I think it's going to be fun. Like, I don't actually see anything wrong with it. I think it's going to be something interesting to watch, but I think it's going to be more like that Lakers team that tried to get Gary Payton and Karl Malone at the end of their careers, and it just didn't work out because they weren't that good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, you think the league encourages this to take place?
I guess. I mean, it draws attention, which is always good. People would obviously have opinions, and that's always good for TV ratings. Where it happens, theoretically I could see LA. LeBron did say he's willing to take a pay cut, so if they trade Blake Griffin for Carmelo and Wade and LeBron go for no money, then maybe that could happen. But I'm with Phil. I don't think that they would be a serious contender. I don't think they could get past Golden State, and for that reason, while it might draw some good attention to the NBA, I don't think it makes a big difference. And really, to become popular now, you got to be a good team, and Golden State has proven that, and I still think Golden State would be the focus of the league as long as they can keep this team together.
Yeah, and if I was these guys, I'd go to Phoenix because you need the best medical staff at that age that you can get. Now, to continue our saga of guys not named Kobe Bryant on the farewell tour, I'm actually going to bring up a guy from their generation who was there at All-Star Weekend, but not for the most memorable moments. Tracy McGrady is one of those biggest what-if guys in NBA history. Phil, I'll send it to you first. What stands out to you about his career?
What ifs kind of all over. I think people think of him as this incredible scorer. We're thinking back to, Houston with those 90 seconds, making up all those points, his ability to score over so many people. But, underrated defender. I mean, look at his time in Toronto. That's one of the biggest what ifs. Imagine he had stayed with Vince Carter, and according to a lot of guys in the league, that team with Anthony Davis, Charles Oakley, and the rest would have been a very strong contender. He, was a defensive monster, blocking a lot of shots. I think he was forced into a role with Orlando, which he should have had either a healthy Grant Hill or Tim Duncan. Another huge what if. Like, I know Duncan didn't sign, but imagine Grant Hill had been healthy. Maybe drank a little less Sprite and had some healthy ankles, but and then with Yao Ming and Houston, I honestly think he gets downplayed a lot. People say he's a good player, but I think he was like a really good player, like almost like a great player. Like, I would stack him against a lot of guys. I mean, who was that article? I think it was Kobe Bryant actually saying like one of the guys actually beat him in a game where he would have the most trouble against was Tracy McGrady. Just being 6'8", a great ball handler, great rebounder for his size, shot blocker, stealer, had 3-point range, had clutch gene. I mean, honestly, if I'm redrafting a team and you're asking me to pick a shooting guard or a small forward, he's at the top of that list, and I know there's a lot of talent there.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, what was he pound for pound one of the most talented guys you ever saw?
Absolutely. Tracy McGrady at his 2-year peak was the best shooting guard in the league. He was better than Kobe Bryant was at his peak, in my opinion. His career, as Phil said, surrounded by what-ifs. I think if he was in a better situation, if he had the right teammates, this was absolutely one of those elite shooting guards that you could build around. And the other thing that really stands out to me is McGrady he was one of those first off-ball guys that ended up initiating a lot of the offense. He would get so low with his dribble. He'd get around shorter defenders. He was like a point guard in a lot of ways, but just an absolutely devastating scorer. Clutch as they come. It's just a shame that he wasn't rewarded with good teammates throughout his career. Bad luck with injuries, both in teammates and with himself. But at his absolute peak, we're talking about a top 50 player in NBA history.
Phil, the fans in Toronto, of course, remember his early years with Vince. I mean, what was the biggest reason you think why he left?
I think this is a really good story, and I'm really glad you framed it that way. It's the story of kind of seeing the grass is greener on the other side. I mean, this was a time when we saw a lot of guys. I remember Steph Marbury left Minnesota when they got Kevin Garnett, thinking, he wants his own team. Like, the whole idea of wanting your own team was really big at that time, wanting everything on your shoulders, and he got it. But, him and Doc Rivers weren't enough to get it done in Orlando. And he had some help in Houston. But turning back to Toronto, I think this is why it's one of his biggest regrets ever, because he realized that wanting the fame and stardom and money and being your own team, at the end of the day, was to the detriment of his overall career and possibly rings he could have gotten with his cousin in the budding We the North of the Six.
Yeah, I remember the words he said before he left. I've got moves no one's seen before, and the world got to see them in a way. But things never work out how you really script them. Justin, do you think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I don't know about first ballot. We're talking about a very brief peak, not a lot of success. I think eventually he'll get in. He's got crazy accolades, or individual accolades, I should say, over his career, but just with the lack of team success, with kind of the injuries and career being cut short, I think it would take a little bit longer for him to eventually get in.
Phil, you mentioned that 21 point whatever effort. Were there any other moments that really stood out for you for his career?
I mean, the dunk contests, I think he was an underrated athlete. But honestly, it was literally just that moment where I was a budding I got into basketball in 1995 when the Toronto Raptors came in, and just seeing them have McGrady, I think that was an Isaiah Thomas pick, and that was who was kind of underrated in terms of his drafting, and then seeing Vince come and knowing they were cousins and finding that out as a young basketball fan and just being like, this is it. And to me, it's before LeBron, it was the decision. And I think it's going to haunt him the rest of his career, and that, as a Toronto fan, was a little bit tough to swallow.
Justin, if you had to pick one guy today who reminds you the most of Tracy, who is it?
Oh, man, that's tough. You're putting me on the spot there. Yeah. Jeez. Man, honestly,
he's not.
Can I say this year's version of DeRozan? Like, now that he's shooting a better percentage from three. McGrady was never a great 3-point shooter, but just that length. DeRozan's starting to show some vision there. Explosive athlete, improved handle. Doesn't have the same kind of defensive repertoire, but I mean, there really aren't a lot of great shooting guards in the NBA, at least that fit that same mold.
Could you maybe
so
say
I'm
like
going
a
to go
Paul
with
George?
him.
Does that make sense?
I was thinking Paul George too. Yeah.
Yeah, but Paul George is like 6'11", so actually, let's go with Andrew Wiggins. Wiggins, I always thought McGrady was the best comp for Wiggins. Doesn't have the three-point shot again, and kind of a similar game to DeRozan, but either Wiggins or DeRozan, I think, are kind of in that McGrady mold.
One last thought. We always think about Vince Carter in that dunk contest, but it was Tracy who threw those bounce passes that helped Vince get that win. So part of his legacy we cannot forget. All right, Phil, I would throw it back to you to wrap it up. And Craig Shaker, stay strong.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks for joining us on another episode here in the lounge, hoopslounge.com. We have Justin, we have Mark, we have myself, Phil. All of our descriptions will be in the description below here on the YouTube channel. You can also catch us on SoundCloud/hoopslounge for your audio podcasting needs. Keep the conversation going because we talk basketball 24/7. And thanks for joining us again in the lounge.